Conquering Manhood, Session 11.
Conquering Manhood. Command your legacy. Take action. And conquer all.
Welcome back, Conqueror Nation, and thank you for joining us. Something special for you today. I'm excited to bring a special featured conqueror known for use in social science to solve real-life relationship issues. Our highlighted guest has written an amazing book titled Factually, 10 Proven Steps from I Wish to I Do, which is the first science-based dating book that guides men and women through every phase of dating from before they meet until they make a commitment. Our featured conqueror is our first female guest and has earned a Ph.D. in psychology, is the founder of LoveScience.co, a site on research-based relationship advice for everyone. She teaches and contributes to Psychology Today, eHarmony. She teaches at Austin, Texas University, University of Florida, and Cal State. Conqueror Nation, I present to you Duana Welch. Duana, thank you so much for coming to the Conqueror Nation and being the first lady, actually, here on the podcast.
Jose, it is a great honor. I'm a fan of your work and a fan of your fans, and I thank you so much for having me on the show.
Outstanding. Duana, I'd love to start off with a little icebreaker, and that is, what did your house smell like growing up?
So I love this. This is a great question. When I was little, my father was a smoke jumper. And you know what a smoke jumper is?
Not exactly, but I think I have an idea, so I'll let you go ahead.
These are those, one might say, somewhat crazy and definitely brave-hearted men and women who jump out of airplanes into forest fires and fight the fires. And in the summers, we lived in the Pacific Northwest, which is where I've recently relocated. And my father sometimes would be gone fighting a fire for 2 or even 3 weeks. And then when he would come home, the whole house would smell like the forest. And he was kind of this mythical seeming man to me because he was almost 6'5". You know, he would come in with all his gear and just drop it and hug all of us. And of course, I didn't realize he had just been in a really dangerous situation. But I just remember loving that smell.
Wow, and I'm sure he came home just happy to survive, happy to be alive, and grateful to see his family. And so all smiles and dropping his load.
Yeah, absolutely.
6'5", smoke jumper. I mean, I feel sorry for any man that came after him.
I believe that other men are frequently intimidated in his presence, although he's a very nice guy and ready with a laugh and a smile.
My wife always tells me the same. I mean, you intimidate guys with your size, and I'm like, I don't think so, but I'm just a big teddy bear. All right, Duana, so thank you for sharing that amazing story and connecting us with your father. We'd love to go a little bit deeper, but here at Conquer Manhood, we love to start things off with a favorite success quote or a mantra, something you've told yourself to help guide you on this life journey. Do you have a quote like that? And then tell us how that applies to you.
I do, and here it is. If you can find and be someone kind and respectful, then your love life will go well. And if you can't, it won't.
Who do we attribute that to?
Well, I hate to admit this because it sounds so awful, but that's my quote. But I do live by it. And the reason that I came up with the quote, though, is really what's important about it. So I am a social scientist who writes about relationship issues. And in combing through all the social science that I've ever found, that is the quote that distills all of it into just one sentence. It's really the truth. And when I found that out, and I learned that when I was single myself, it really changed my approach to finding love and to choosing a partner, because I needed to be kind and respectful, even if my day wasn't going well. But also I needed to be very sure to choose someone kind and respectful. I don't know if you've ever heard that Dave Barry quote, if someone's nice to you but rude to the waiter, they're not nice. And I think that really sums it up. You need to find someone and choose someone who is consistently kind and respectful, and you need to be that person also. So learning that has really helped me to help myself and to help others, and to find the marvelous husband that I have. So it's been a life changer for sure.
Well, it's something I actually tell my wife all the time. It's, we have to be kind to each other even when things aren't going our way. And just if we can communicate that through any relationship, coworkers, people that you're trying to mentor, or deeper relationships like love, it will change everything and guide it in a loving and peaceful way for sure.
Well, it will. And there are some people that it won't work on. There are people who are just abusive. And by the way, there's a scientific definition of abuse, which is someone who tries to use violence, finances, sex, threats, verbal speech, or any means to control you in a systematic way. So if someone's trying to control you systematically, they're abusing you. And unfortunately, kindness and respect doesn't alter those people in the way that they do business. But if you're kind of respectful and you don't get that back, it really tells you something very powerful about your relationship with this other person, that probably you need to create some distance there. And you're right, it's really an effective thing to use with anyone, in the sense that it just makes you a better person too.
Couldn't agree more. And so, what would you say then to if you're married to someone and you find that they don't respond well to this kind and respectful manner and just being sweet to one another when things don't go our way? How do you deal with that?
Well, that's a really deep issue. So it's really going to depend on the history of the marriage before the guy or the woman tries consistent kindness and respect. A lot of times when people come to this realization, it's through therapy. And I recently learned that the average couple goes through 6 years of profound unhappiness before seeking counseling. That's a long time. And so, a model of unhappiness that's been in place that long, it's going to be difficult to disrupt that model with just some kindness and respect. So, what I would say is, if you're in an unhappy marriage, first of all, you married this person for a reason, and this marriage deserves every shot at success before you give up on it. So, yes, be kind and respectful, but understand that at first, your wife is probably going to see your efforts with view the efforts with some degree of suspicion, because that maybe hasn't been the way things were going before, and she may be very defensive. Or maybe, let's say, she tries kindness and respect after having been really critical of you for several years, and you think, okay, what's going on, what's the trick here, what's the angle? It's just going to take a while to heal from that level of unhappiness, but it's worth it. And I want you to know that research shows that fully 86% of people who are so miserable that they are considering divorce describe themselves as extremely happy in their marriage within 5 years of having considered divorce, if they just stay together. So I want to nurture the hope out there in the hearts of the men who currently are wondering if it's all worth it, and to understand that kindness and respect is the path back, but that you may not get it all in one fell swoop. It's going to take time to overcome long-standing behavior patterns.
I'm glad you shared that, Duana, and to the Conquer Nation, I just want to highlight that we just have to practice humility and embrace the patience that it requires to perhaps then get from this depressed and bad relationship status to where you're seeing the fruits of your effort when you're being kind and respectful on the other end.
Exactly. And I've got to tell you, some of you guys, it's not going to work. You're going to be kind and respectful, and you're going to maybe go and find a Gottman Methods couple counselor, which I highly recommend. Later in the show, if you want, I can give you advice on how to find that person. I'm not one, but I can tell you how to find one. But you want to throw everything at it, because this is your marriage. And I will tell you, occasionally there is someone who does everything right, and it turns out that the marriage is not salvageable because the other person cannot meet them with kindness and respect, even with a lot of effort. And in that case, the marriage may need to end. But you want to say to yourself, if you make this exit decision, I did everything that I possibly could do.
And speaking like a true scientist, there's hope, but you've given us the facts as well.
Yeah, so John Gottman created a method of couples therapy. I've been doing some writing about it recently. Actually, I've done writing about it for about 15 years, but I've really focused on it in a couple of articles for a science site called Red Orbit in the past few weeks. And Gottman method couples therapy is the only method that's been rigorously scientifically proven to work. And what Gottman did is, he was a therapist in the traditional therapies, and he started suspecting that these methods were not helping the couples that he was seeing. And he started collecting data, and he found that, in fact, they weren't helpful. And he thought, I wonder why that is. And it occurred to him that most therapists have never seen a happy couple. Happy couples don't come in for therapy. All the therapies that existed before John Gottman were based on work with the unhappy couples. So he was the first person to collect data on happy couples, find out what was working for them and why, and create a therapy in conjunction with his wife, also a therapist named Julie Schwartz Gottman. They created a therapy based on the science that specifically taught unhappy couples how to thrive the way happy couples do. And it's very successful. And if you just do a Google search on find a Gottman method couples therapist, you will immediately come to the link that finds one in your area. I just highly recommend that for men who are in a point in their marriage where it seems like all hope is lost. They bring couples back from the brink. It's amazing.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Duana. I will have that definitely linked up on the show notes. And that gives us some light of hope for those out there that need to repair and recoup. Duana,
Absolutely. It helps about 83 to 86% of couples who pursue it.
you've given us so much, Duana, already with the definition of abuse. Speaking about John Gottman, we'd love to know a little bit about you. Can you fill in the gaps? Tell us a little bit about you on a personal note.
Well, sure. So I'm not proud to say this, but the reason I got interested in relationship science has nothing to do with my graduate school training. I'm trained as a memory and aging specialist, not as a relationship scientist. What got me interested in relationship science was my own failed relationships. I was in graduate school, I was getting my PhD, and I went through a particularly painful breakup, and I was feeling just heartbroken. I went to a bookstore. I guess that's where we nerds go when we're feeling heartbroken. And there was nothing there for me that was based on science. And I really wanted, in a field like relationships, I don't know if your listeners realize this. I didn't even realize this till I started examining the data. How your relationship goes will determine your happiness more than anything else in this life, more than your religious values, more than your job, more than your career success, more than the family you come from, more than anything else in your adult life. What's going to make or break your day to day happiness is going to be your intimate life, whether you have a partnership that is thriving. And yet, the books that existed were solely based on opinion. And I think that's one reason men weren't reading these books. Because when I wrote Love Factually, which is the first book that uses science instead of opinion to guide people to find their life partner and decide whether or not to commit, I thought that it would mostly be women who read it, even though I did write it for both sexes. Fully half of the mail I've received and about half the reviews I've received have been from men who are really enthusiastic about it. It's not that men didn't want to learn about relationships, it's that they wanted facts. And so it's been very rewarding for me to learn this information, apply it to my life, and find my wonderful husband, Vic Harriton. It's also been amazingly rewarding to hear from so many men saying, this is exactly what I needed. Thank you so much. So my work really came from a place of my own failure, and which led to success because I stopped relying on what culture was telling me, what my friends were telling me, what my family was telling me, what a lot of different resources were telling me, and instead look at the facts, because there were facts by then. We've got about 60 years of data on relationships that most people had never heard of, including me.
Thank you for sharing your journey about how you came about to even writing this book and how personal it was. I think that most people, me including, I started this journey of self-development and trying to better others and teaching others about it as well, based off of, just being unsatisfied with what I had produced thus far. And so I just started this journey so that I can also inspire others and learn while I'm on it. Because as I'm sitting here with Duana Welch, I'm picking it all up, taking notes, just like all of our other listeners, so that I can improve my relationship as well.
Well, that's very kind of you to say, and very flattering and humbling. I feel like the person who's most responsible for my success is my husband. I've done so many things with him that I never would have done without him, including writing that book. He was the person who said for about 6 years before I wrote it, Duana, you've learned all this stuff. It worked with us. It's working with your clients. Write a book. Why don't you write a book? Hey, have you thought about writing a book? And really, He just kept at it and kept believing in me until I started believing in myself. And that's exactly what science says happens in a relationship that where you chose the right partner and you behaved correctly after you picked them, is that they're going to bring things out of you that are more positive and more productive than anything you would have come out with on your own. And I also support him. He's worked in zoos all of his life, not as a paid profession. He was a programmer in his paid life, but as a passion. And when we got engaged, one of his good friends said, "Oh, Vic, it's a real shame you're going to have to give up working with lions and tigers and bears. Oh, my." Because he has worked with all those animals and more. Um, and I looked at this mutual friend of ours and I said, "Why would Vic have to give it up?" And she said, "Well, of course you won't want him doing that now that you're getting married." And I said, "I'm not going to ask him to stop being who he is. I'm going to support that." And so, he supports my dreams and I support his, and they're not always the same dreams. I do not want to go into a cage with a lion. Thank you. No. My mom didn't want to go up in an airplane and jump into forest fires, but we both supported our guys in doing what they believed in doing. And my husband has definitely supported me in doing what I want. And it's just a very powerful outcome of being able to choose the right partner and then be the right person for them.
That's amazing. And you mentioned it before, and in my experience as well, most relationship books tend to be opinion based, or if science is referenced at all, it's almost like a separate entity to the underlining love and relationship concept. In your book, you start off with relationship myths, which I love. Let's start there, and then tell us how science replaces these myths with facts, and then what are these? What are these relationship myths?
So there are four really prevalent ones. I don't know if we'll have time to really get into all of them, but the first one is the belief that somehow this relationship is just going to happen for you, just magically without you putting any effort into it. And science has discovered a word for people who wait for love to happen to them, and that word is single. And I'm really not joking. Of course, it's not a scientific term, but so here's the people who don't have to put any effort forth. People who are in high school and college are frequently in environments that are just rife with the single and available, and they don't have to look very carefully. They might just stumble across the right one without making an effort. The rest of us have to work at it. So one of the things that I hear frequently from singletons is men and women alike is my friends all tell me that it'll happen when I'm least expecting it and that I need to stop working to find it, that my working towards it is actually hurting my prospects of ever finding love. And what I write back to them is false, false, false. Keep at it and don't listen to them. Keep working at it. So that's one major relationship myth. Another major myth has to do with that you will only be happy with a partner if you are happy on your own first. Now, that one's very seductive. Almost everyone I speak to believes that one, that you have to have this awesome mental health and be perfectly happy in your life and be, passionate about everything you're doing and have all your ducks in a row in order to be able and worthy of finding the right life partner. Science fully disagrees with that too. Isn't that a surprise?
That is a surprise.
Yeah. So here's what science shows. Yes, you need to be working on getting your stuff together before you find Mrs. Right. Yes, you do. But when you find the right one for you, she will make you more productive because you'll be happier. She will make you happier because human beings did not evolve in isolation. We evolved in groups of people, and we specifically evolved to need a life partner. Think about how long our children are dependent on us. It's not just until they're born or until they can walk, it's until they can launch. That's a long time. We evolved to need to form an intimate partnership that would last until children can launch, until they can survive without two bonded parents. Because we evolved that way, we are made happy. Think about how happy you are after a big meal or after good sex. Guys, why do you think that makes you happy? Because that perpetuates the species. Your emotions are tied directly to things that are good for the species, good for the survival of your genetic line. And so finding a life partner is good for the survival of your genetic line. And you're going to be a lot happier after you find this person. And that's going to make you not only happier, but more productive in your career. So it's just not true that everything has to be in a row and you have to be perfectly happy on your own. Very few people are perfectly happy on your own. Did you know that men's odds of death from every major cause are 6 times greater before they're married than after?
That's amazing.
I mean, if being single was such a great deal, that stat wouldn't exist. It's more dangerous to be single than it is to have a pack a day smoking habit. Statistically true. And that's because, in fact, finding the right life partner is very life affirming. It makes your life better. So that's another major myth. And this ties into yet another myth, which is relationships aren't worth it anyway. So why even try to get married? Here's what the science says about that. And by the science, I'm not just talking about one study. I'm talking about studies across several decades in every country where data have been collected. That's more than 37 countries to date. Here's what I know for sure. If you get married, you are more than twice as likely to describe yourself as happy compared to everybody else. By everybody else, I mean people who never married, people who married and divorced, people who cohabited but never married, people who were married and then were widowed. Everyone. You're twice as likely to describe yourself as happy. You're also much more likely to be having sex at all, to be having sex regularly, and I think most importantly, to be having sex that you describe as off the wall awesome. Not just sex, great sex. You're also more likely to have good health. You're more likely to have a good job. You're more likely to have a better career trajectory once you get that good job. And you're more likely to become wealthy. I mean, really, what is left except for how good looking you are?
Who can ask for anything more?
Yeah, it's really, I hate that marriage has gotten such a bum rap because the science it just runs directly contrary to that. And actually, one of the things that I love about having become a relationship scientist and someone who consumes other people's relationship science is that it's so often surprising. I mean, all of that surprised me when I learned it too. Okay, so on to myth number 4. Myth number 4 really isn't a myth, it's a way of being. So to really get into this would be a whole separate interview, which I actually think would be a lot of fun to do at a future point.
Okay.
But your attachment style has an incredible amount to do with how successfully you're going to be intimate in a relationship. Your attachment style is your habitual way of behaving in an intimate partnership. All of us have an attachment style. There are 4 different attachment styles, and they are just heavily deterministic about your behavior. The good thing is, if you don't like your attachment style, you can change it. And again, if we ever do another interview, I would love to go into depth about how to change it if you don't like your style. I changed mine. I didn't like it and I changed it. And it made me able to have a deep, intimate relationship. Also, once you know your attachment style, you know what kind of person you should look for, because there are some attachment styles that are oil and water. They should never be together, and yet people keep trying to make them work. But I'm going to have to leave a little air of mystery there, or we wouldn't get to talk about anything else, and we go way over time.
Okay, so the 4 myths are starting from the last to beginning. The attachment style was the last one, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Relationships that are not worth it, and so people say why bother, and then why people believe they have to be happy alone first before they can fulfill someone else,
Yeah,
and
but that's
then
not true.
why, which is not true, and relationships will just happen on their own. Okay,
Exactly.
can you tell us, Duana, what qualities then and traits a man must look for then when trying to find Mrs. Right?
Well, there are basically 5 big things that I would suggest. Of course, I want you all to form your own list. And guys, I hear you groaning. I can hear it from here. I know men do not like writing a list, but I will also tell you this. Every man who's written a list, who's written to me about it at my email, has told me that yes, he thought it was really, really lame that I requested a list, and then he wrote the list and it changed his life. So I really encourage you to do this. Write a list, and your list needs to be as detailed as you can possibly make it. Things that you're looking for in a life partner. You can also do this if you already have a life partner and you're kind of on the fence about whether this relationship is workable. And the list needs to be, I encourage you to write it on a computer, because then you can easily shift where items are, because you're going to reprioritize after you brainstorm it. Some items are going to be at the top of the list. Those are your deal breakers, your non-negotiables, I like to call them your must-haves. I must have someone kind and respectful. That needs to be on everyone's list, for example. Your other must-haves might be specific to you. If you're a Catholic and you really believe in that, you might have must be Catholic. For other people, it might be, well, I'm Catholic, but it's okay with me if my partner isn't. So that wouldn't be a must-have for them. That's going to be idiosyncratic, up to you. Then everything else on your list is desirable. Let's say that you think you want 2 kids, but really you could compromise on that. Maybe she already has kids and you're fine with that. Or maybe if it just didn't work out, maybe you would feel like, okay, well, we'll have a different adventure in life together. So that would be desirable for you, but not a deal breaker. You see where I'm going with that?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got this list. Beyond the list, there are really 5 times when you need to insist on certain qualities when selecting a partner. The first one I've already more than alluded to, and that is someone who is kind and respectful even when things aren't going their way. Okay? So if that's not there, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. It's probably $5,000 now, inflation, but don't go forward with that relationship. The second one is someone who heals rather than worsens your issues. Every one of us has issues. Every one of us has emotional baggage. No matter how wonderful our parents were, they made mistakes with us. No matter how wonderful they were, some of the things that they did that might have worked with another kid just didn't work with us, right? So we all have baggage. We have baggage maybe from former partners. I'm divorced. I definitely have baggage from that. And so what you want is someone who, when you are with them, you feel like your higher, better self, and you feel like you're getting well from those issues. Not someone who worsens them or someone who constantly reminds you of those issues. That is not the right partner for you. The third is someone whose past won't ruin our future. I know that it's popular for people to say that it's unfortunate we don't have a crystal ball. And that's true. But we kind of do have a crystal ball. And here's what it is: the past. The single best predictor of what any one of us is going to do in the future is what we already did in the past in a similar circumstance. Let's say you get together with a woman and she reveals that she cheated on her last 3 boyfriends, but she would never do that with you because you're so wonderful. Guys, are you listening to the first part of what she said?
Ding, ding, ding.
That's a red flag. Basically, what she's done is she's protected herself against what you might find out and given herself a handy excuse for you not taking that seriously. Okay, let me tell you about the kind of person who cheated and is not going to do it again. She's deeply ashamed of having cheated. She only did it once, not a bunch of times. She has had several years since she cheated, and she's had substantial relationships since then, and she did not cheat on them. That's the kind of person who's not going to do it again. But if she reveals to you with no particular remorse that she did it in the past, but maybe she even indicates they kind of deserved it, and she would never do that with you because you're such a great guy, I would put my running shoes on, folks. Similarly, if she says that she had a problem with alcoholism or drug addiction, folks, there are a lot of really good people with bad addictions. I am not meaning to slam people who have a history of addiction, but addiction is immensely difficult to overcome. The biggest long-term study that was ever done on alcohol addiction showed that fewer than 15% of people, 15 out of 100, were able to stay sober continually for even as long a period as 4 years. You want this behavior to be in her distant past, not in her present, because that is a problem you do not need to sign up for. And I'm not being harsh on the person with that problem. You're my client right now. Those of you listening to me, I'm trying to help you. If the addict or alcoholic called me and talked to me, I would talk to them about how to get over their problem and how to find somebody supportive. But right now I'm talking to you about how not to get into a deeply troubled relationship. Don't get into relationships where there is an enormous problem that is in the recent past which they have not corrected, whatever that problem is. Don't let their past ruin your future. Fourth, someone who wants the same amount of intimacy that you do. Okay, I don't just mean sex here, although I do mean sex, but not just sex. This deals with attachment style. You want somebody who, when you pull towards them, does not pull away from you, right? You don't want to be constantly, yes, at the beginning of relationships, a lot of women are uncertain. The most highly desirable women are usually hard to get. They're not playing, they just are hard to get. Guys, you're not the only guy who discovered that she was an amazing woman, right?
Right.
So she might be hard to get simply because she's highly desirable. She might not answer all your calls. She might not say yes every time you call to take her out. That's not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about you got into a fairly established relationship with her, and just when things started going well, she started pushing you away. You need to make it as a requirement that you look for someone who wants you the way you want them once the relationship is on solid footing. Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense.
And then finally, you want someone who wants the same kind of relationship you do. Let's say that it turns out you're kind of a traditional guy, you want to get married and have kids, and it turns out that she wants to travel the world, have no children, and she never wants to get married because she sees it as an outdated institution. I've got to tell you, that's pretty unusual. It's usually women who are more pro-marriage than pro-men, than men are. But let's say that that's your scenario. You really want to settle down, and she's like, I'm never doing that. I'm going to quote Maya Angelou here. When somebody tells you who they are, believe them. Don't turn it into your life campaign to change them. Do some people eventually change? Sure, but do you want to bet on that slim possibility? I wouldn't encourage it. I think that conversely, if you're a guy who says, you know what, I just want to play the field forever and ever, and again, that's not common. Most guys don't want that forever and ever. But if you are one of those guys, there are women like that, and you need to find them. Don't break your heart and other people's by initially settling for a profound mismatch like that. So that's my 5 kind of things that I think should be on everyone's list, things you should be looking for.
So, Duana, you mentioned it yourself. You said that these, relationships that stick through it and fight will eventually report back saying that they found happiness in the relationship after 6 years, I believe you said. So, what do you recommend for those that avoided, didn't make a list and probably broke all of these 5 rules and all of these 5 traits, but they want to mend the relationship that they're in because, life happens. They have kids. They want to be the person that fixes this relationship. I know you also mentioned that sometimes it's just not going to happen, but what do you have for them?
Well, I was just thinking about this. Couldn't be better timing. Yesterday, StoryCorps had a story about, it was an interview with a woman whose ex-husband had died in 9/11. And he called her from the 100-something floor of one of the towers to say goodbye to her and to say that he loved her and to say that he loved their children. And he didn't mean he loved her like as the mother of their kids. He loved her as in he had never gotten over her. And he was calling to say goodbye because he knew he was dying. And I'm getting teary right now. I cried when I heard that because I thought, when the interview was much lengthier than this, and that was a marriage that broke up for really no reason. They just didn't know how to communicate, and they could have learned that. Guys, here are the 3 times when your relationship is just not going to be salvageable. If there is chronic addiction, that's not going to be a workable relationship, even if you have kids. If there is chronic adultery, I doubt you're going to be able to put up with that. That's going to be humiliating and degrading for you. If there is chronic abuse, meaning systematic attempts to control you, I don't mean like, she tries to say when you can go out with your friends. I don't mean like low level control. I mean like she gets hold of all the money and doles it out and controls every move that you make, kind of abuse. If there's chronic addiction, adultery, or abuse, your marriage isn't going to make it, not even with counseling. But anything short of that, science indicates that you could have a thriving marriage. And so what I would say first step is for you to just simply decide, commit to a pattern of kind and respectful interactions with your partner. And when she starts writing you about something, because probably by now, if you're in an unhappy relationship, science says the dynamic goes like this. She criticizes you, you defend yourself. She shows contempt for you, eye rolling, saying something snarky or sarcastic. You stonewall, you shut her out, you refuse to engage. It's like a bad tennis match. If that has become your pattern, criticism, defensiveness, contempt, stonewalling, if that's your pattern, you are headed toward divorce. And it's a real darn shame because you don't have to go there. So the first step is for you to decide to react to her with kindness and respect. Let's say she launches into a harsh criticism with, Jose, you're too hard on the kids. Gosh, I can't stand it. You're such a jerk. Okay. And you normally would say, you know what? I have to be the heavy because you never are. This is a very common marital fight. What if instead you decided to say, our marriage is so much more important than this fight. I want to be kind and respectful to you. Tell me what you need. That takes a huge amount of men. If you can do that, you are the man. That takes so much self-control and so much patience and so much gentleness and so much of everything that a real man is. If you can do that, my hat's off to you. Most men, most humans, male or female, it's going to be Herculean for them to do that. So I got to tell you, if you can do that, you're my hero right off the bat.
How do we learn that, Duana? Because that's not natural.
It's not natural. I would suggest that you find a Gottman method couples therapist. And if you can't find that, I would suggest that you buy John Gottman's book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work, which will guide you through this process. I know most men don't like to read relationship books, but I also know they're reading mine because it's based on science. And if you like science and you want facts and you love your wife and you want your relationship, I would read that book, The 7 Principles for Making Marriage Work. And I would try, that book costs just a few dollars. You can find it used for like a penny and $3.99 shipping. I would buy that book and I would live it, learn it, love it, because it's so much cheaper than your first counseling session, and it's certainly cheaper than divorce, child support, and alimony. You want this to work. You want this to work for you. You want this to work for your family. You want this to work for your kids and your community. You are part of something bigger than yourself. And so that's what I would advise doing. Most people can't do this on their own once they've reached that point of criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. When you're playing that bad tennis game, you need something to interrupt it. And that's what will help.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. I will have that linked in the show notes as well. And I will recommend everyone get that.
The proudest moment of my professional life is I found out that Dr. Gottman was reading my book. And I have almost, this unholy amount of worship for him because he's changed the landscape for couples that would have been considered hopeless to hopeful. And he's done so much for the world of love and thus the trajectory of those people's futures and their children's futures. And I just have such regard for him. And he actually wound up supporting my book and blurbing it. And that was just the proudest moment of my non-family life, my professional life.
It's funny you mentioned that, Duana, because I was about to jump into the man up round where I ask you a series of rapid questions. And the first one was going to be your proudest moment with Love Factually. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, that's it for sure. I actually, when he wrote me his little note of what he was going to say about my book, I actually burst into tears. Because, imagine that the person that you have the most respect for, who you think has actually changed the world, because he really has, says, hey, attaboy or attagirl, way to go. It blew my mind. It was so, I can't, he said, call me John. And I said, I'm sorry, I can't. You're Dr. Gottman.
Congratulations on that. All right, so I do want to jump into the man up round. So before we do, let's thank our sponsors. This session is brought to you by Body of a Conqueror, the definitive guide to building muscle and strength. I discovered what it really takes to build reliable muscles that rapidly increase in strength, and it's different from anything you've done before. To conquer fitness, go to conquermanhood.com/BOC. Conquering Manhood and all my other sites are run through inmotionhosting.com. If you want 30% off your web hosting plan plus a free domain name, check out conquermanhood.com/hosting to get that deal plus some bonus material for me. Now, back to the show. Duana, this is the second question in the man up round. Benefits that marriage brings that most of us don't think of. I know you mentioned some. But do you have any others that men just overlook?
Well, I really think I mentioned all of them. I just did it really fast, but I do think that one common thing that's overlooked is the sexual aspect. It's very common for everyone to joke that, oh, you're getting married, you'll never have sex again. So there's research that compares the married to people who are living in other arrangements. And the only people who are having as much sex as married people are cohabitors. In other words, the swinging single lifestyle, those people aren't getting laid. Sorry to say, but it's just not happening for them the way it is for married and cohabiting people. What's even more interesting to me is that when you compare married and cohabiting people on their sex lives, the married people are having the most satisfying sex. So that's interesting to me because the idea, and I've even heard a bunch of therapists to say this. I was at a party with a marriage therapist who said that, well, marriage kills sex. It's just people don't have sex anymore. And I met a book author, an author who was writing about sex, and she said, yeah, marriage just kills sex. And I said, well, it's interesting because if you're seeing unhappy people, which this author was, she was writing about people who were unhappy with their sex lives who were married, and this counselor was seeing only unhappy couples. He wasn't looking at the science on what's happening with happy people. Most married people are happy. They're not going to therapy. They're not answering this woman's call for unhappy people for her sex book. And so when you look at the science, not only are married people having more sex than everyone but cohabitors, but they're much happier with the sex that they're having.
Yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, I mean, this person, let's put it this way, this person loves you. They want you to be happy. So they are doing whatever it takes to make you happy. Your happiness is a priority for them. That's what it's like in a good marriage. So, yeah, I think that's the big overlooked piece of it. Does that mean that you will not have dry spells? Oh, heck no. I mean, things are going to happen. That first baby, your wife is probably going to be all touched out. That kid's going to be on her like Velcro, and she's going to be exhausted by the end of the day. And yeah, she's probably going to go through a period of time, science and my own observation would indicate, where she doesn't feel much like sex. There may be a time around menopause or when her hormones fluctuate when she doesn't feel much like it. But you know what? She still loves you. And what Gottman's and other people's research showed was a lot of times when there were lulls for one partner but not the other, they dealt with it through mutual fantasizing, mutual masturbation, working harder to get each other in the mood, accepting that for a while there might not be as much interest, but they worked it out because love was the most important thing, and that fed into everything they did, including their sex life.
It's just the wave of the marriage. It's you have to communicate that with your wife and understand and have realistic goals and what you're going to attain in the marriage in relations to sex. My wife and I, we have a 9-month-old, and those are things that play heavily into what we can do, even outside of the bed, going out on a date night. There are things that we need to change and
Yeah, yeah.
adjust.
That 9-month-old needs you. It's funny. There's another book for anyone who's going through what you are, which is the adjustment to parenthood, having a baby in the house when you used to have just each other, and there's this huge transition. I want to recommend another book that's entirely science based, which will really help you maintain the spark in your relationship and have a really satisfying marriage going forward. Because I will tell you, research shows that for 2/3 of couples, they are permanently less happy after the birth of that first child. But they don't have to be. It's tragic when that happens because it turns out that, again, studies of happy couples reveal how to be the happy 1/3. And studies also show that couples who learn to do what the happy 1/3 are doing become happy also. So the title of that book is And Baby Makes Three. That's the name of it. And Baby Makes Three.
Clever
And
name.
that book is also written by the Gottmans, John Gottman and Julie Schwartz Gottman. Wonderful book. I cannot stress enough how important it is to get that book.
Thank you for sharing that. I would
Mhm.
love to know what research says that are traits that women look for in men for a loving relationship, and also what qualities make her feel secure.
Oh, this is a great question. So, women are looking for the following statement in its entirety: the willingness and ability to provide and protect. Our psychology comes from a time when we were still cave people. Studies indicate that our brain structure has not changed since then. I can't go into the details of how I know that, but I do know that that is so. Our psychology for men and for women has not substantially changed in over 45,000 years. And so women are still looking for what a cave woman would have looked for, even though a woman today could be a CEO of a company and not need your money. She still wants a man who can and will provide and protect. Now, how does she assess that? Well, the can part is, do you have a good job? Do you have a good work ethic? And by the way, if you're feeling like, oh, that's why all women are gold diggers, notice that the person who drove you to work on the bus today is probably married. Is he a millionaire? No. Women are not really looking for a rich man so much as a man who can and will devote himself to her. The willingness is more important than the ability. So you could have a job that just brings in steady pay, and maybe it's not that great a pay, but if you will give it all to your family, that's a go. That's a yes. So women are really more interested in your willingness. Now, how do women assess willingness? Aha, guys, this is where every one of you can shine, no matter how rich or poor you are.
Taking notes.
The way women assess willingness is, do you love me? Men who are in love give it all, everything, heart, soul, bank account, all of it to the woman they love. If you don't love them, you don't act right. You really don't. Think about the guys you know who don't love their girlfriend. How do they act? Do they act right? No, they don't. So women look for love. And so, guys, if you're in love with this woman, do not play it cool. Tell her you love her and shower proofs on her. Proof of love, saying it, introducing her to your family, introducing her to your friends, being proud of her everywhere you go, proposing marriage, being a good husband, putting a ring on her finger, all of these things. She is looking for signs that you want to commit and that you are committed. This is why when guys play hard to get, women are turned off by it. Guys try to play hard to get sometimes because it works on them. You know why it works on you? Because you're looking for someone who's not going to have sex with some other guy once you're married to her. That's causing you to raise some other guy's kids. You're a caveman too. She's a cave woman and you're a caveman. And you can't be there all the time making sure that all the kids that result are actually yours. So you have to have something called trust. What's your basis for trust? That she was hard to get, right? So men continue to value women being hard to get. Guys, do not play hard to get with her. She doesn't value you being hard to get. She values you running towards her, not away. She values you being available and willing to give your time, your resources, your heart to her. Do not hold back. You're not desirable if you hold back. When you find Mrs. Right, you shower everything on her. That's it.
That's it. All right, Duana, thank you for sharing that. This is the last question in the Man Up Round, but one that I ask all my featured conqueror. Delighted to find the female touch to this question, and that is, what is your definition of a conquering man?
So, as you know, we started talking about kindness and respect at the very beginning of this. And to me, the conquering man is a man who is the master of himself. He can control himself enough to be kind and respectful, even when it's tempting for him to fly off the handle and display his temper. All of us have that moments, but the truly conquering man is able to conquer his own urges and do what is right in the moment. He's able to think, am I going to fight right now to win at any cost against my mate? Or am I going to decide to be in this relationship and put the relationship first, even if it means acting against the way I feel in this moment? That to me is heroic.
Wow. Duana, it's been a privilege to have you on as our feature conqueror and our first lady. I had a blast. Before we say goodbye, let us know how we can connect with you. And if you have any parting words, please do tell.
Oh, sure. So you can find me and my book at www.lovefactually with an F.co. lovefactually.co, and it has a way to get in touch with me. Frankly, you could just Google Duana, and I'm the first Duana that comes up. Thanks, Mom and Dad, for a weird name. And you would also find me that way. Oh, my parting words are just thank you so much for letting me be on the show. I really appreciate you and everyone who's listened today. And I do hope to hear from you all again.
Conqueror Nation, love Factually, the 10 proven steps from I Wish to I Do. Get it from Amazon. Leave Duana a review on Amazon as well once you've read the book. I'll have it linked up on the show notes, and everything that we talked about today can always be found over at conquerormanhood.com. For this one is session 11, or you can just type Duana in the search bar and everything we talked about will come on. Duana, thank you for coming on. And and hope we get to talk again.
That would be marvelous. I look forward to it, Jose.
All right, Duana. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Conqueror Nation, that's a wrap for session 11 of the Conquer Manhood podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Our featured conqueror today was Duana Welch. Quickly has become one of my favorite authors for this year. Make sure to go to Amazon, purchase her book, Love Factually. Leave her an awesome review on Amazon and go and join her on all of her social media sites. What a fascinating conversation. So many takeaways, so much hope for the future, and so much if you are going to plan on love and how to build your relationship on solid ground. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe to the podcast. If you haven't done that, please leave us a rate and review over on iTunes, as this helps so much with the rating of the show. Until next time, Conqueror Nation, I ask you to command your legacy, take action, and conquer all.
Thank you for listening to Conquering Manhood. Now, it is time for you to conquer all. So take action. Head to conqueringmanhood.com and grab the 4 steps to conquering manhood, the ultimate guide, for free.